Ken Dabbs here, sharing highlights from a textual analysis that poses the question, does Wells Fargo win over fickle millennials? We will apply a rhetorical ideological analysis of a wellsfargo.com article about millennials to determine if Wells Fargo is persuasive at winning over skeptical millennials. Millennials do hold a distinct ideology, and that's where we begin. They are concerned about debt. They witnessed firsthand the economic downturn in 2008. They live the fear of knowing how debt can limit the very freedom that they seek. They delay starting their life. They're not in a hurry to take the traditional life path of forming a family and purchasing homes and cars and colleges and so forth. They distrust institutions. They quickly point out corporate greed. The label consumer isn't one that they seek. They want to be preservers and givers, not takers. They are informed and picky consumers. They expect knowledge on demand, and they use that knowledge to make wise purchasing decisions. Technology has been a part of their life since day one. That's how they get through their day, and technology is a status symbol. Millennials are a disruptor generation, and their size and ideology has a strong influence on various sectors and how companies are run. One study says 84% of millennials believe that an Apple-type brand will reinvent banking as we know it. Let's take a look at Wells Fargo ideology. There is a belief that most people have or soon will embrace the American dream, which requires the bank's help and products to happen. Big banks like Wells Fargo also believe that they are the ones who are enable, in fact, the American dream. Most people can't do it on their own. Financing is needed. Here we see a symbol for Wells Fargo, their stagecoach with the tagline, "Together we'll go far." It's not "you'll go far," it's "together we'll go far." So Wells Fargo is driving the stagecoach. Are the millennials on board? And then finally, banks can be trusted to offer financial advice. And so trust is a value that big banks must instill. People must know that their money and financing is safe and that the bank will do right by them. Logical face-off in the Wells Fargo text that we will examine. Given the bank's need to establish trust through relationship, does Wells Fargo win over the fickle millennials in this text? What do we see as these two distinct ideologies come together? Analysis, we will apply an ideological analysis methodology, beginning with the step of identifying the ideologies. And then secondly, we will identify the dominant ideology. Third, we'll determine the effectiveness of the persuasion by the dominant ideology. And then finally, from the analysis, we'll make observations and begin with a brief synopsis about the text. The article appears on wellsfargo.com in the stories section. The title is "Millennials Create Remedies for Improving Their Financial Health." It's written by a Wells Fargo team member. It describes a day-long workshop contest that the company facilitates with millennial students from the University of California at Berkeley and Stanford University. 9 teams compete. First prize is $10,000 for the team to share, and second place is $5,000. The overall article story is written in newspaper narration style. The author summarizes the day and the workshop. And, of course, the 2 winning recommendations. 2 senior Wells Fargo leaders are quoted saying the day was a success. 2 millennial participants were asked how they will use their contest money. Both say to pay down their debt. All right, step 1, let's identify the ideology in the text, beginning with Wells Fargo. And so, first and foremost, most will embrace the American dream. And so the contest goal itself implies that millennials will soon embrace the American dream, devise ways that technology can enable millennials to improve their financial health, and come up with ideas to combat the generation's anxiety about their finances. The focus on finances implies that they soon will be buying homes and cars and have mortgages and loans and ways to make their money grow through 401ks and so forth. So the implication is there that millennials care about their finances and that they will want to manage them. And so the implication certainly is there around Wells Fargo's ideology. Secondly, banks help people obtain the American dream. So there's references, and it's phrased many times, helping them improve their financial health. Well, who's the one helping them? It is Wells Fargo or another financial services company. Three references say, again, help students improve their financial health. Well, who's the one helping is the question. And again, the implication there is that it's the bank. And then finally, banks can be trusted to offer financial advice. So the question, how might we, and this is posed for the participants, how might we, Wells Fargo, design an experience to engage and motivate millennials to improve one or more of their vital signs to financial health? It implies, hey, you can trust us. Of course you would come to us, but how can we make this experience good for you? It almost doesn't even focus on trust, assuming that the trust is there, assuming that the millennials would look to them for advice. The top two awards, the recommendations are linked here. Recommendation number one, the idea is to build a forum where millennials can talk about financial issues on their own and provide Wells Fargo team members to help organically. But again, the assumption is that Wells Fargo could be trusted. And then finally, of course, with the second recommendation, that appears as well. So let's look at the millennial ideology in the text. I'm concerned about debt. So many references to millennials as being anxious, being worried, that debt is a concern. And so that is certainly there. And it's always in reference to their student loans. Distrust institutions is not explicit, but it is implied in how the two winning teams frame their recommendation. Their recommendations are all about them getting the information, them driving, and organically having relationships with the bank, but not firm relationships. A little bit of distrust kind of comes through in that recommendation. Then finally, delay in starting life. Only reference to any financial need is student loans. There's no specificity around buying homes and cars and needing, to save investments or things like that. Continuing with the millennial ideology, informed and picky consumers. So the headline, millennials create remedies for improving their financial health. They're the ones in control. They're the ones getting the information. They're the ones creating the remedies. The winning team recommendation was, again, to help millennials feel more comfortable, help them to get informed so that they can remove their anxiety. Technology as a status symbol. So the question framed for the contest, implies that technology is the solution. Winning teams include technology in their recommendations. And then finally, there's no references to any traditional banking like branches or tellers. So let's look at the and talk about the dominant ideology in the text, beginning with millennial in the blue shaded boxes. And so there are three images of millennial participants. There are no images of Wells Fargo team members, or the logo doesn't appear for Wells Fargo. The headline, millennials create remedies for improving their financial health. And then the millennial teams compete for contests with their own recommendations. So the spotlight seems to be on millennials. But I would argue that they're not the dominant ideology in the text. Wells Fargo is the one that selects the contest question and facilitates the workshop contest. And so there's careful control, right, to frame it and to lead the participants down the road. And keep in mind, the participants are competing for a contest. And so, we don't know if they're motivated by the money to win, or are they motivated by other things? But Wells Fargo is certainly in control. Secondly, Wells Fargo writes the article, the other contest winners, describing their recommendation and what they will do with their prize money. There's no quotes or observations from millennial participants. Two Wells Fargo leaders are described. They describe the day as a success. And then finally, millennials are described as being in need. They need help, but they're also controlling. Inferred at times that Wells Fargo might be pacifying them. It's almost like Wells Fargo is saying, hey, you're in charge. You're the one that gets to decide. You're the one that's in the driver's seat. When in fact, really, Wells Fargo is in the driving seat because they're managing the day, they're leading the day, And at the end of the day, Wells Fargo or other big banks are the ones that the millennials will owe they're paying off their loans to. So the dominant ideology seems. So the next part of the analysis is to determine the effectiveness of persuasion by the dominant ideology. And so we're going to look at the language of trust by Michael Maslansky, well-known linguistic researcher who uses a dial language methodology to study focus groups and to gauge their level of reaction to words and language. And we'll adopt this model from the language of trust, which says first and foremost to be personal, make your language relevant, tangible, and human. Secondly, to be plain spoken. People don't know what you think they know. Simple does not always mean short. Say enough, but not too much. Be positive, but not Pollyanna. Be forward-looking. Positive is for things and not against them. And then finally, be plausible. Sincerity is the new black, is what Maslansky and team says. Plausible language is neutral. Plausible language is complete, and it avoids superlative. Because of these four components, this level of trust comes through in text that can reach people and instill positive relationship. So let's look at this in the text. In terms of personal, I believe that it's more of a yellow. It's not green, which would be positive. It's not red, which would be a negative. It's more neutral, that it is a narrative reporter style. It's good that there aren't any superlatives or lofty language, but it isn't very personal. There isn't any type of relational type tone in the text. We don't have any type of examples or perspective from the millennials. We don't know how they feel. We don't know what their point of view is. We don't know them. And so therefore it feels a little bit neutral and possibly institutional. There is a lack of empathy. We talk about them being concerned, but we don't really know them. We don't know the extent of their concern. We don't have names to apply here. Secondly, plain spoken. Fairly green here because the focus is on factual depiction. And so, it is good that the way the article goes, it just talks about the day in a way that seems like someone's reporting on the event. So you can take at face value that the events as they're told actually happened. That could be a good thing. Plausible. The text is missing transparency. There is somewhat of an elephant in the room in that the workshop goal is framed by Wells Fargo. It's led and managed by Wells Fargo. There's a contest goal. One would wonder, is the real conversation happening? Do we really know how millennials feel? Do we really know how Wells Fargo feels? Are they really talking and connecting? So we would question that, and that would be a negative. But it is, from a plausibility perspective, positive that there is a narrative reporter style. There's no superlative type language, nothing lofty. And it is positive, but there is a negative side to it as well, in that the unspoken is unspoken. And so we're not really talking about the things that are important to millennials. So one might question, is it really positive, given the fact that everything's not on the table kind of leads to that. So from the analysis, let's make some observations in conclusion. First and foremost, Wells Fargo seems to be leveraging a communication as strategic control approach, both as the company appears to interact with the millennials at the workshop and how the workshop is actually described in the text. Leveraging communication as strategic control sometimes is a necessary tactic or strategy. When it's obvious that two groups can't share meaning, then sometimes putting the focus on framing it in a certain way so that they can come together and accomplish something together is the best approach that you can do. Perhaps that's the reason why Wells Fargo chose this approach. The negatives to this approach is that it limits collaboration and it limits true bonding and true relationship, because real real feelings, real meanings, real dialogue doesn't occur with communication as strategic control. And we actually see that in the text. The text linguistics, tone, language with its reporter-neutral narration style is positive in that no lofty superlative language can be detected, which would make Wells Fargo motives suspicious if they were to be in the text. It's negative, though, in that there's a lack of relational language. There's no empathy, making the workshop encounter and the text describing it feel relationally cold. So therefore, I would conclude that overall the text does little to win over millennials. Participants were most likely motivated by the contest. My recommendation, to be more transparent. Text could have referenced how millennials feel towards big banks and how Wells Fargo wants to earn their trust. We could have had the real conversation. Secondly, and to be more relational, the text could have highlighted more empathetic themes, like spotlighting one or two participants, letting us get to know them, let us hear from their voice, how they really feel and how they really regard banks. Thirdly, to be more open, the workshop itself could have included an open-ended component to ask millennials their sentiments towards big banks and what they'd like to see banks do differently to earn their trust. That might have led to a more robust and perhaps uncomfortable dialogue that could have yielded more goodwill sentiments and a step towards trust. Here below, we see a blurred picture of the workshop participants, and it depicts kind of how the text feels. It feels almost cold to neutral. We really don't know them. We really don't feel or sense that coming through in the text. Ideal would be to have it in focus. We want to see them clearly, and we want to understand their point of view. Thank you.